What even is Community? I mean, simply put, it's a series about students in a study group at a community college in Colorado. But what even is this show? While falling in line with many sitcom tropes, Community is really weird, often changing up the cinematography and even the continuity for the sake of a bit. Much like The Simpsons, hanging out in the five corners, Community borders the realms of realism, fantasy, funny, smart, and genuinely touching. When I first turned it on, at the recommendation of several friends back in 2016, the series pretty much had already ended, which means that I binged the entire series after it aired. And I mean I binged it. Hardcore. I think I watched the entire series while I was laid up in bed sick one week. So let's first talk about the characters and the casting. I remember Joel McHale from the stint on Talk Soup back in the day, but I really hadn't seen him in anything since. McHale plays that sort of arrogant, self-absorbed lawyer, and he plays it excellently. To the point that I'm not even really sure he's acting.
Yeah, I know it's hard, buddy, but look on the bright side. This way you'll have 4 Christmases.
His too cool for school thing and grand speeches are a staple of his character. Chevy Chase gave the show an experienced comedy guru, but in some ways the character of Pierce never really lands for me.
I feel intensely bored by Pierce as a subject.
But Pierce represents the older crowd, complete with outdated, politically incorrect views.
A half Polish, half Arab virgin in his 30s. One way or the other, that story ends with an explosion.
And then there's Shirley. Yvette Nicole Brown is awesome, and I'm grateful for Community shedding the light on her for me. She was a regular on Talking Dead, and I loved listening to her comedic take on the analysis of that show. In Community, she plays the sweet, sassy, and sometimes shady
Christian,
sometimes single, sometimes not, mom of the group.
Mother hen, I think we about the same age.
Sure, unless time is linear.
I'll make your ass linear.
Danny Pudi is incredible in the show as a quirky, socially challenged, but sweet Abed, with a constant pop culture references, some real and some made up for the show.
Reggie, to the time booth. We haven't much space.
Please don't jim the camera like that.
Abed is one of my favorite characters of all time. Donald Glover, unfortunately not related to Danny Glover or any affiliation with Miles Morales, except maybe his uncle.
I don't want those weapons in this neighborhood. I got a nephew who live here.
Is amazing as the airheaded jock Troy.
I know it's sad, but death is a natural part of life, and by the time I finish this sentence, 100 people will have died in China.
Why did you stop talking?
Yeah, I'm funny.
The chemistry between Glover and Pudi is awesome, and it's a giant portion of the pie chart depicting reasons why I love Community.
Making it seem like I'm celebrating when actually I'm infiltrating Santa's operation? Yoip! Going deep, cover past enemy lines, making it.
And then we have Alison Brie, who's making a name for herself all over the place now as a young perfectionist character who's also married to Dave Franco in real life. And they're just adorable. I'm not weird. And then there's Jillian Jacobs, the former protest-happy activist.
Britta Perry!
Oh, I'm sorry. I have to go. I just won a contest for being hot.
The show rounds out the cast with Jim Rash as the Dean and Kinjongis Chang, both eccentric characters who continue to get weirder and weirder as the show goes on, much like Community, but we'll get into that later. The structure of the first several seasons are semesters in the community college, with a premise for each episode ranging from someone's feelings getting hurt, an upcoming test, or discovering some mystery Scooby-Doo style.
Joshua was racist. That came out of nowhere.
Did it?
I've always appreciated the writing in this series, and that's because this show is funny. Big surprise, I know it's a comedy show, but guys, I don't laugh very often. I'm not a laugh out loud kind of person, and Community is one of those shows that can actually trigger audible laughter from me.
Bagel.
A staple in a series like Community is its writer's ability to track inside jokes. And this one gets it right. While I think Community doesn't hold a candle to a show like Arrested Development in that light, Community does a great job of jokes that reward die-hard, eagle-eyed fans throughout the series.
And for the record, I feel very vulnerable without a gun.
Ugh, the only song that plays in this thing.
And this show is meta. And I define that in this case as the ability to poke fun at the sitcom tropes as well as itself. Community often turns typical sitcom plot lines like the infamous 2 dates and 1 night trope and plays them out in an unexpected way, and it includes Brie Larson. Under the gimmick that Abed, the character who views reality from a skewed perspective by all the TV and film he's consumed over the years, kind of like Cable Guy.
Cable Guy!
Abed eventually becomes a puppet of sorts for the writers to exposit some meta humor to us, the audience, which sometimes lands and sometimes doesn't.
The show's gonna last 3 weeks!
6 seasons and a movie!
But past that, the meta humor source comes from cinematography and editing itself, with several episodes shot as homages to Glee, Law & Order, old Christmas specials, and even a Ken Burns documentary.
I'll be home late, sugar boots. I bet hurt Troy's feelings by being a robot. Need to stay with my boy to make sure Britta doesn't put him on the weed.
And then there are weird fantasy type elements in the series, like how the school miraculously gets back in order after a campus-wide paintball game. Or the time the psychologist tried to convince them they were crazy. Like I've alluded, the Flandersization of the series really took effect after season 4, with episodes continually jumping the shark.
Oh, we're losing Pierce! Everyone, quickly!
Oh, and one other thing Community does better than everything else, while I love The Office's cold openings, Community's outros are some of the best.
Me llamo T-Bone, la araña discoteca. Discoteca, muñeca, la biblioteca.
This is where we get some of the amazing Troy and Abed bits.
Troy and Abed in the morning. Nights. Troy and Abed in the morning.
Yeah, Chris, we get it. The show's funny. I know.
I have good taste.
I'd be in danger of clickbaiting you all if I didn't discuss why Community matters. And I don't mean why does this series matter itself, per se, just the premise of the show, the message. When I watched the first episode, I'm gonna be honest with you, I was really underwhelmed. I see what they were going for, and I was intrigued. So I pushed through as, hey, I kinda hated the first season of The Office too. As the seasons went on, I was gripped, sometimes by the absurdity and the humor, but more so because I felt like I belonged to the group. Community is about misfits who fit together perfectly to build a community in a community college. And a community for people who've been marginalized, stereotyped, beaten, bruised by the world and by their own self-destructive tendencies is a message that we can all relate to. We can always watch a show where all the people look alike and think alike.
Ridiculous situation descending into heavy-handed drama for the illusion of story. Check.
But in Community, the diversity of the characters is not just some checkbox from some woke studio executive. Can I say woke? Okay, I'm going with it. The diversity is actually weaved into the essence of the show itself. That people of all kind belong in community with one another.
But you know what they'll never make a replacement for? Friends.
It's the weirdest thing about humans. We seem to have both this inextricable craving for independence, yet we're so dependent on relationships. It's one of the things about the show that I love. It explores the nuance of relationships. Gay! And you see the web of relationships that they have throughout the series, both romantic and platonic. But mixing a Shirley archetype with Abed is great.
They're playing hide and seek.
Where?
I don't think that's how it works.
Or a Chang with Annie.
Thanks for sticking up for me.
No problem?
From now on, she's dead to us.
And that's the overarching message of Community. The deeper meaning in every episode is actually not hard to find because the writers basically have Joel McHale delivered in a monologue every episode, which then they even make fun of that.
Are the emotional ghosts that I like to call fear. Anchovies. Fear.
Nonetheless, I think the way the writers were able to weave the grandstanding speeches point throughout that episode's events through the multiple plot lines hits almost every time, and I have such an appreciation for that degree of writing. So Community matters because the message of Community is laced throughout the series with hope through desperation that while the crumbling masses of bureaucratic establishments erode around us...
Wow, did you know Greendale students are technically in the Army Reserves?
People are the key.
Guys, are we really gonna let religion divide us like this? I think there's one thing we can all agree on.
I get 72 virgins in heaven.
No.
And I absolutely recommend binging this series. It's on Netflix in the US right now. I'm pretty sure that it's available on other platforms too. So yeah, I've got a ton more thoughts on Community, but this is my first stab in a while at summing up an entire series in whatever this episode ends up being. So hope you liked it. Leave it in the comments. Let me know what you think about Community, and maybe what your favorite episode is, or joke, or bit, or whatever it is that they do, and what series you'd like for me to cover next. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.